Hey everyone, it's actually Jeb Bush, and welcome back to another NBA SoRare video where we continue to prepare during the NBA offseason. The NBA Summer League has wrapped up, and the regular season is approaching faster than you might think. And while we have some time between now and the actual start of the season to actually make those purchases, I think continuing to add players to your watch list and monitoring their prices is crucial right now. Now, before we go any further, I do want to clarify my buying strategy in this video a little more in depth than I usually do. And that's because it's the off season, and when the new season starts, players that already have a decent amount of circulation will get additional cards minted for Series 2. So what we don't want to do is watch this video, see a player we really want, and immediately go and buy his card. Instead, what we want to do is start to monitor his price, maybe set some watch alerts on SoRare data. And if he gets to a price that you think is a steal because someone aggressively undercuts, or you decide that you can wait until the first week or two into the season before you purchase him and his inevitable dip, that I think is the better play in this case. Like I said before, since it's the off season, people, including myself, are not logging on to NBA SoRare every day to monitor the market like we were during the regular season. And because listings expire on the marketplace, there are a decent amount of players who have their prices that might be pretty inflated when we compare them to the beginning of the season as people really start to jump in and grind lineups, or especially 1 to 2 weeks into the season as certain players take a jump, maybe some players take a step back, injuries happen, all this other stuff. So like I said, what we don't want to do is purchase a player at what might be their highest price throughout the entire season. So now with that financial advice out of the way, let's go ahead and take a deeper look at the Portland Trailblazers. Now, last video, we talked about the Washington Wizards. And one of the big reasons we targeted that team is because they were one of the few obvious sellers going into the season. With the new management, the Wizards decided to aggressively tank, get rid of some of these big contracts and big stars, get a lot younger, stack assets, get young players, etc., etc. The only other team in a similar situation before the season starts is the Portland Trailblazers. Since we know that Damian Lillard has demanded a trade and almost certainly will get traded before the start of the season, it's very safe to say that the Trailblazers will not only be tanking, whether purposefully or not, to continue to acquire assets, but they're also going to be seeing how good their young talent is, and that's including the addition of Scoot Henderson. Now, one thing I want to point out right away as we're taking a look at the Trailblazers on SoRare data is how high Damian Lillard's cap is. And the reason this is important is because, Damian Lillard obviously was the number one guy on the Trailblazers and had incredible usage as a result. That usage, obviously, some of it will get taken up by Scoot Henderson as he basically assumes Lillard's role, will be handling the ball a lot, and even in Summer League has kind of shown some early flashes that he might really do something in the NBA. However, there is plenty of usage to go around now that Lillard is leaving. And that's why I think some of these players on the Trailblazers are prime targets for this upcoming NBA SoRare season. So with all that being said, smash the like button on this video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And let's take a look at our first player, who is Sharp. All right, so starting off, we can see Sharp has a circulation at a little above 1,100, which means that he doesn't have way less than a lot of the players, and he doesn't have the most either. So his circulation is going to be a non-factor here. He's not going to be the scarce player that we could see a real squeeze on or anything like that. His floor is at $18, which is a little high. It's not outrageous, but I do think it's a bit inflated just considering he's a second-year player, and we really don't know what we're going to get, at least at the start of the season. So like I said, I'm not jumping to immediately add a Sharp to my collection, but obviously he's someone that's going on my watch list. Another reason why I'm not jumping to add him to my roster is because of this cap. 38 is a bit high to start the season. And the reason why it's so high is because the Trailblazers started tanking last year when they realized they couldn't really make a playoff push. And as a result, Sharp was allowed to go wild. He had a green light and he racked up some empty stats. As you can see, if you look at his other two cap indicators, his last 40, which is 21, and his season, which is 17, his current cap to start the season is basically double. So Sharp is not a player I'm putting in my week one lineups. and probably not my week 2 or 3 lineups. There are just players with lower caps that can perform better and will perform better. So once again, I think Sharp is a player you put on your watch list and you don't buy before the season starts. And you hope that with the additional circulation and maybe some poor performances in NBA SoRare context, he goes down. Like if Sharp puts up a 40 in week 1, that's not great because he's not outperforming his cap by much. I think the result of that is people kind of, maybe are a little excited about Sharp because they're excited for him to get all this additional usage. And then he ends up being a bit of a hindrance almost to them placing on a SoRare week. Or alternatively, they can't figure out how to fit him in their lineup because his cap is so high. And I think the Sharp hype will die down a bit. And that's when you're going to try to buy that dip because I do think Sharp is an incredible play for the entire NBA season as a whole, just maybe not those first beginning weeks. But I will say, if we look at his scores, we can see that ceiling capability, which is always exciting to see. I mean, dropping a 50, a 52 here, and even in the 40s, like not every player can do that. So having a player that has the potential to do that, hopefully on a semi consistent basis, is encouraging. But like I said, most of the season, as you can see, he was putting up pretty minimal numbers. And, these numbers are coming once they decided to tank and he was playing major minutes. One more thing I want to point out, just kind of to hammer home this point. If we look at his minutes per game on his last 10 compared to his last 40, I mean, that's a substantial difference. So, yeah, I can't stress enough that while I'm very high on Sharp for the NBA SoRare season, I'm actually very bearish on him at the very beginning of the season. And I think if you approach things at least slow roll, even if you want to have Sharp in your week 1 or week 2 lineups, I would say really exercise some patience here and try to get a steal of a snipe because I just don't see him holding the value he has right now. And as we've seen before, people tend to overreact. Now, the last thing I want to take a look at is his price graph, kind of just so we can see where some of those lows are, where maybe we can think is a little more reasonable of a buy. As you can see, people were buying Sharp under $10 pretty consistently for a very long time. This is even in June, after the season was over, that people were still getting him under $10. So, and if we go back here, between these three peaks here are because of the Trailblazers tanking, like we said. But you can see this massive dip right here. And he was going once again for $5. So yeah, I think $18 is insane to pay for Sharp right now. I think there's no world where that makes sense. And I would try to aim for, anywhere between $5 to $8 in a couple weeks into the season, like I said. But yeah, I think it's always just good to check the price graph on SoRare data to kind of see where your highs and lows are so you can set reasonable expectations. Like you're probably not going to get Sharp for $2 and you're probably also not going to sell him for 50. So it's important to have those lows and highs in your mind as well so you can kind of know what to expect and know when you're getting a good deal or when you might be overpaying a bit. All right, so the next guy I want to take a look at is a player that I actually think the Trailblazers massively overpaid for, but I think he's kind of in the perfect NBA SoRare situation of putting up some solid empty stats like we were talking about earlier. And that, of course, is Jeremy Grant. All right, so taking a look at Jeremy Grant, we got standard circulation here. We got an average price at around like $8. Nothing too exciting there, nothing too high, nothing too low. His cap is at 30, and as we can see, if we look at his L40 and his season, that's pretty consistent throughout. And if we take a look at his stats, we can see that his L10 minutes per game compared to his season minutes per game are pretty standard as well. So personally, out of all the players on the Portland Trailblazers, for NBA SoRare purposes, I am the highest on Jeremy Grant. I think he's going to have so much more opportunity to get additional usage. He'll have even more of a green light than he did before. And I think one thing about Jeremy Grant that's important to remember is he sees himself as a top player. This is a guy who was on the Denver Nuggets and wanted to get traded because he wasn't getting enough playing time, he wasn't getting enough touches, etc., etc. So he went to Detroit and then the Trailblazers where he could have a bigger and bigger role. Now, obviously, you have to be a bit delusional to complain about playing with someone like Jokic. We know Jokic is passing the ball a ton, he's setting you up for super easy shots. So I think being aware of kind of Jeremy Grant's whole mindset and, level of delusion here is pretty key because I don't see a world where Jeremy Grant just doesn't have a complete green light to put up massive empty stat games. The Trailblazers are not going to be trying to win. They just paid Jeremy Grant $160 million. So they're going to want to get their money's worth to some degree. So he's going to be out there putting up big minutes, big shot attempts. He can get a block or two for you. He can get a steal. He is a very good player. He's just not the level of player that, maybe he thinks he is. But this works in our favor for NBA SoRare. So let's go ahead and take a look at the price graph here. As you can see, there are a couple little pumps. I even sold into one. I'm assuming that I got this Jeremy Grant card as a reward. And I was able to sell him for 20, which makes me happy to see considering where his price is now. And I would imagine these little pumps kind of happen because of injury news or maybe him coming back from an injury or something like that. And then we see this dip as Jeremy Grant was shut down along with Lillard as the Trailblazers tried to actively tank. So we'll take a look at the scores in a second and you'll see that Grant put up a bunch of DMPs at the end of the season. However, the thing that I find the most interesting about this price graph is that during this entire offseason, we do not see a single pump. We do not see a pump when he signs that contract. We don't see a pump when Damian Lillard demands a trade and becomes public news. You would think the value of Grant would increase knowing that he would get additional usage. He would be one of the key players on the team after signing that giant contract. It kind of shocks me to see that there hasn't even been a slight uptick. But yeah, this is kind of insane to me considering the circumstances. Personally, I think Grant is going to be one of the better mid-level NBA SoRare plays potentially because of the reasons we've highlighted. So to some degree, this is the cheapest that Grant has ever been. So as you can see, I currently don't own a Grant, but I might go ahead and just throw an offer out there and see if I can get someone to move off of him. As you can see, here was an offer that was accepted for $4. While most of these are just below 10, here's one for 6. So it is possible to lowball someone on a Grant and have them accept it. And I think that would be an incredible steal if you can get this guy for $4 or $5. Now let's take a look at his scores and kind of further highlight why I'm kind of excited about Grant. As you can see, there's a bunch of DMPs here at the end of the season, like we said. And, maybe this is why Grant's price is a bit low, is just things ended rough. If you had a Grant, he was going for like close to 20 and he dropped all the way down to around $6 or $7 and he was completely worthless at the end of the season, which is always a bummer. So maybe because things ended on such a sour note, people aren't rushing to buy up Grant because, their last memories of him on SoRare is probably losing money on him. But if we take a look back at the other games, we can see Grant was consistently dropping some 40-point games here. And we can even see the 64 here and this 58, this 54, which really shows that ceiling capability. And at 33 cap, I mean, him dropping a 50 above is a pretty decent score. And if we go and take a look at some of the scores, let's see if we can find that 64. Here we go. Now we can see 2 blocks, a steal, assists, rebounds, threes, and points. Like Jeremy Grant can do it all. And while I don't think he's going to suddenly start dropping triple doubles now that Dame is gone, but I do fully expect to see some incredible SoRare performances from Jeremy Grant this season. All right, so we've talked about Sharp and Grant. And before we talk about this third and final player, I really quickly do want to say that I believe I'll be making another video about the Trailblazers once the season has started and maybe once we're a week or two in. Because at that point, I think we'll have a much better idea at what their depth chart and roster will look like for the rest of the season. However, for now, the third and final person that I really want to take a look at is Simons. All right, so taking a look at Simons, we got a pretty standard circulation like we would expect. We have a floor here of about $16, which seems a little bit high. We can see he has a current cap of 27, which is below his season cap. And I would imagine that's because just like Grant and Lillard, he was shut down at the end of the season as well. So maybe a couple of those last games, he played for maybe a quarter and then sat for the rest of the game. But that's great if we're trying to play Simons early on in this NBA SoRare season, because like when we were looking at Sharp, a 27 cap is way, way better than a 38 cap, which is once again why I have said we should wait for Sharp, because I think Simons is clearly a better play at the beginning of the season. And he's somehow cheaper too, which kind of boggles my mind once again, considering the circumstances with Dame leaving and everything else. So let's go ahead and scroll down and take a look at this price graph. As we can see, it's kind of been a constant dip since early February here. It is kind of crazy seeing how high Simons was at one point. I mean, here he's at 50. Back here, he's at 50 again. And even this dip right here was at 25. So for a while, Simons was considered a pretty valuable player for SoRare. And I think at least last year is kind of one of those perfect players that you could either fit in with a star or your MVP player, and he would consistently have a chance to really outperform that cap. But like I said, since February, we've seen a pretty consistent dip here, getting to about as low as $9, $8. Here we can see, a couple at 6 even, as he was putting up those DMPs, and it was pretty much confirmed he wouldn't play for the rest of the season. So we have seen a bit of an uptick here, but still similar to Grant, it kind of shocks me that there was not a major spike correlating with Dame demanding a trade. Well, I'm a little higher on Grant right now, partly because his price is significantly lower, as well as the fact that he can just put up SoRare points in a lot of different ways, while Simons is pretty much a 3-point shooter and a scorer. I still weirdly kind of think that Simons might be a little bit underpriced here. Not that I'm going to go and purchase one right after this video, but still, I'm kind of shocked we're not seeing the reaction that some players like Jordan Poole and Tyus Jones and some of these guys got once they were traded or signed to a team. We did see a bit of a spike with that news. Like we said with Grant, this might just be because of the fact that Simons ended the season with a bunch of DMPs. So just a lot of people kind of have a negative, or at the very least, not a very excited feeling about Simons going into the season. But I mean, once again, this guy's going to have a green light, and he's not going to be playing second fiddle to Damian Lillard. He might be the number one guy. He might even be handling the ball at times here. Obviously, depending on how him and Scoot work out and kind of how their chemistry and their play styles coincide. But yeah, I mean, at this price, I would love to scoop a Simons right now below $10 or at $10. I think that's a pretty great entry point right there. Let's take a look at his scores real quick, kind of just to show, like, yes, we had all these DMPs at the end, which is not great. But as you can see, especially at the beginning of the season here, I mean, Simons was putting up a lot of 50s. And, once again, with a 27 cap, that's more than double his cap. So if you're playing Simons at the beginning of the season with that 27 cap, which I don't see lasting too long, I could see his cap getting close to 40, maybe a little below that. Really depends on how the Trailblazers look. But I mean, a 27 is a no-brainer for week one, in my opinion, especially if the Trailblazers are playing, 2-3 games. So yeah, like I said, I'm pretty high on Simons here. I think he is a must pick up before the season starts if you can get him for a good deal. Just like Grant, while Sharp is the one that I would kind of slow roll. So I think I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. If you made it this far, thank you so much for checking it out, and I would appreciate if you left a like and made sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, feel free to leave a comment below. Let me know if you think I missed anyone on the Trailblazers, or my assessment of the 3 players we talked about was wrong, or if there are players on other teams that you think are a steal right now that you should scoop up before the season starts and he appears on everyone's radar. Obviously, this is episode 2. We have plenty more to talk about, but I would love to get a conversation going because I love to talk about stuff like this and kind of grind that edge and try to find the people that everyone's sleeping on. Thanks again for checking out this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Please clap.